It's time to get chiseled with Rob Commodari.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Chiseled. And why do we call it Chiseled? Because we're all a work in progress. I'm your host. I'm Rob Commodari. I'm also the author of the books Better Than You Think and co-author of the book Next Level Your Life. But today, I have my guest, Brian Buffini, all the way from San Diego, California. Now, over the years, I've done 100 some episodes, and many of them, I say 60% of them, have been with realtors in the Buffini organization. So today you're going to hear straight from Brian Buffini. Now, he's a force of nature in the world of business leadership and personal growth, and he's the founder and chairman of Buffini Company, the largest business coaching company in North America. He turned a simple belief, and Brian, I want to get into this, a simple belief into a global movement that people can do better, be better, and live better. Brian came over to America with $92 in his pocket. He left his family with his brothers and came over to America with $92 in his pocket. And he's built this world-renowned company. He's been through some tough times. He's been through some good times. So he's a best-selling author, New York Times best-selling author, and his impact stretches beyond real estate. So today, Brian Buffini, welcome to the show. Top of the afternoon to you.
Well, the rest of the day to you, Mr. Commodari. It's a privilege to be here.
Well, thank you so much. So, Brian, I guess the first question I have, that you come from a family of 6 children, your mom and dad in Ireland, and you leave Ireland, you come to America, and you build this awesome business. Give us some context of how you went from there to here.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of twists and turns in between, right? Everybody wants to get to heaven, and no one wants to die to get there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I love the concept of chiseled, right? I've talked about it before. One of the moments that changed my life was as a 14-year-old boy being in the Vatican and seeing the Pieta, right? And again, same designer, Michelangelo, and just that something like that pure could come out of a big block of marble and look so good. The thing about it is that, you know, when the chisel lands, it hurts. You know, the chiseling is a hammer hits a straight blade of iron and knocks lumps off you. Now, I think over the years, I've learned a couple things. One is either be humble or get humbled. So I offer myself up on most days to have the lumps knocked off me. But the world and everything else knocks the lumps off you as well. So I love the concept. You know, I've known you 20 years plus. I'm a great fan of yours. You know, I get thousands and thousands of requests, and I take very few. In fact, I take none. So it's to be here today. I love the concept. We are all a work in progress. And so, you know, everybody wants to get to heaven. No one wants to die to get there. Hey, Brian, how'd you get the business and the jet and the this and the that and the other? Well, there was a hell of a lot of lumps knocked off in the meantime, and an awful lot of being faithful with the little to be given much. And so I can honestly tell you this. When I started my real estate career, obviously, you know, I had no money. I've been in this terrible motorcycle accident. So I'm 19. I'm 7,000 miles away from home. And I have a debilitating accident where I developed gangrene. They're going to amputate my leg, all that stuff. And I end up $250,000 in medical debt, which, again, was not the system I grew up with. And I mean, in today's money, it'd be millions, right? This is 1986. So I got no money. I've got rods and screws in my legs, so I can't go home to Ireland. I had to have 13 more surgeries. And I got into a business because I saw a sign in the window that says, we'll train you for free. And I went, okay. And I walked in, I limped into a door on a set of crutches and got my real estate license, and then started a training program. And literally the biggest thing I will say is this, is that when I got into real estate, you know, in the late 80s, the number one trainer at the time, his phrase was, find them, fleece them, and forget them. And I thought, man, that's not values I can live by. So I had values I was raised with, and you know this as well as anybody. You've heard me tell this story many times, but I was raised by my father and grandfather who had a painting business, and their principle was, can you put your name to your work every day? Can you put your name to it? And that's how we were trained in the family business. So I decided I was going to not do the find them, fleece them, and forget them. That I had a vision of myself being like a country doctor, kind of like the doctor in Field of Dreams. Like, you know, Burt Lancaster. You remember that character? And he had the little black.
Yeah.
That's my vision of myself as a real estate agent. And that I was going to be like that family doctor to people in my community. That I would be that person that'd be trusted advisor, and I'd build relationships, and I'd take care of them and their kids and their grandkids. And that they'd call me for anything, not just when they wanted to buy or sell a home. And that was the vision I had when I was 19 years old. And so I went through like a training program like Sweat Hogs, and, Floyd Wickman, the great Floyd Wickman. But he'd have you also, a lot of cold calling and door knocking and these cold methods. I liked the discipline of what he did, but I used it to build relationships, which, years later, that's where I built 100 Days to Greatness. It was inspired by Sweat Hogs, but just a different approach. And the next thing you know, I committed to training. There was a guy at ERA Real Estate. He was a CEO named Mac Hevner. He was out of Oklahoma. A brilliant guy. He had that Southern accent. And he just had this way of communicating with a customer. Well, I watched these VHS cassettes. I literally watched them till they broke. And I went back to the broker and said, do you have any more of these? Well, 9 months later, I was in the entire country, the United States, for ERA Real Estate. I was the Rookie of the Year. And I got to meet Mac Hevner on stage. And I remember getting this award, and I'm impersonating him, talking to him. And he's like, man, you do me better than I do me. But I committed to training. I had a vision for myself. I committed to get some help. And then I learned it better than anybody in the country. And that's why here's the CEO of a company going, man, you have taken me down to every part. I was still myself. I did it with an Irish accent. And then I moved on. I found I was the big fish in a small pond. So I moved to a bigger pond. And at that time it was Remax, and Remax had the biggest company in San Diego. And they had 106 agents, and 90 of them were then top 100 in San Diego.
Jeez.
So I was okay. Now I went on. I was a big fish in a small pond. So I knew the next thing. So I had a vision for myself. I got training, and then I knew I needed to be, swimming with the best. And so within a year, I was the number one agent in that company. And within 2 years, I was number 5 in the state of California. And within 3 more years, I was the number 5 agent in the whole country of Remax. And I went out to the Remax convention, and I'm number 5 in the country, and I'm 26 years old. And the other people in the top 10, all of them were in their 50s, because they all had deep referral businesses and they've been around forever. And they're like, what in the world are you doing? So then could you sit on a panel and tell us what you do? And I had this fresh approach to doing business, which was loving on my customers, being that family doctor, and then having these added items of value, writing personal notes, throwing client parties, building relationships with my customers. And I would sit there, and of course I'm Irish, I could tell a few stories and have a bit of a joke and whatever. And I'd finish up on a panel, and I'd look out, and the breakout session would be over. Like there'd be 8,000 people at the Remax convention, and they might have 1,000 in this breakout session. And when I would finish up, there'd be 1,000 of them lined up out the door to talk to me.
Yeah.
And they weren't talking to anyone else on the panel. And these other people were like Rolls Royce driving. They had TV shows and radio programs. And I kept going, man, what am I doing here? Like, before there was such a thing as imposter syndrome, I'm like, why are they inviting me here? Like, I'm a wet-nosed kid. I'm trying to learn from these people. But it turned out for the next 2 years, every time I went to a conference, people were like, this sounds like how I want to do business. You do what I believe, only you're doing it better. How do you do it? How do you do it? How do you do it? And a little known fact is I went to college, and in Ireland, you got a scholarship. Like, I couldn't afford to go to school. There's no athletic scholarships at all in any sport.
Right.
There's only academic sports, and based on your school scores, okay, I had 2 options. You can either go to accounting or forestry. Like, if you want your school paid for you. And there was, my house painter's son. So I went into accounting, and then I was actually trained to be an actuary, which is, when people meet me, they go, you're the, the guy on stage or whatever. But it taught me how to be systematic. And so that turned out to be very helpful. So I created a vision for myself. I wanted to be the family doctor. I invested in myself, and I grew, took training. I hung out with the best of the business, right? Instead of being the small fish, the big fish in a small pond, I constantly put myself in a situation, which I do all the time. I'm doing that now. I'm going on a little golf trip in November with celebrities and billionaires.
Uh-huh.
And just for the experience. Like, I'm still that guy. I'm going to put myself in an environment. I'm not a billionaire and I'm not a celebrity. So I'm going to be in that environment. And then the next thing was I systemized things so I could duplicate it. And then I found out that other people had this need. And so I then said, okay, I've done this for almost 10 years. A lot of people seem to be interested in this. So I put on a seminar, St. Valentine's Day, 1996. And I put on a seminar in San Diego. And much to my surprise, I mean, if you got 100 people to show up at a seminar, it was a good thing back then. And I had 460 people show up at my very first seminar.
Wow. I didn't know that story. Okay.
Well, almost all of those people were people I'd done a deal with, Rob.
Okay.
And they were always like, you did your business different. You didn't have all this advertising. You didn't have the giant ego, but you were kicking our butts. And one guy who was one of the top agents in the county said, you listed my mother's home. I go, what? She wouldn't list her house with me. She got 3 referrals from people in her church, and she listed her house with you. And you sold her house in like 7 days and brought in a buyer. So I couldn't argue. That guy, his name is Sal DeCosto. He signed up. He was in our coaching program for 20 years. He said, I'm signing up because I want to know why my mother did business with somebody else other than me.
That's
So,
incredible.
yeah, so I haven't really ever articulated that way, but that's really the deal. And that's what got me going. And, then you wake up 30 years later and I'm introduced a certain way or people perceive me a certain way. But I've just head and rear down for 30 years trying to do the best I can every day.
And it's awesome. It's awesome. I appreciate all the wisdom you've shared with us over the years. So I'm going to unpack a couple of things here. I want to go back to, you made an analogy with the chiseling and it hurts, right?
Mm.
And the thing I thought about was, okay, that you said the hammer, right? And I envision the hammer as God's love, right? And I envision the chisel as your experiences. Right. So he's taking his love and he's hitting away at you,
Yeah.
and all these rocks are falling off and
Yeah.
you evolve. Does that make sense? That sounds like
I'd agree with that 100%. Yeah.
So that said, were you always a faith-filled guy? Because you bring it to the stage, and not many people do that, right? And so you bring it, and you bring it without fear. That's the way I feel.
Yeah.
Were you always that way? Did your parents bring you up that way, or did you?
Well, I was raised in the
grow
church. I mean, CIA, Catholic Irish Alcoholic, right? That's the they call us, right? But so I was a church going kid, but I really wasn't a on fire guy. Okay.
Okay.
And when I came to America, in fact, there's a movie out called The Jesus Revolution. I was in Franklin, Tennessee 2 weeks ago, and I had a chance to have breakfast with Kelsey Grammer, the actor. There's a name drop for you. And the reason I talked with him was because I just went over to him and I said, hey, you portrayed my pastor, Chuck Smith, in a movie. And I said, I knew the man for 20 years. And I go, your portrayal of him was extraordinary. And he said, well, sit down and tell me about Chuck. And so we had a cup of coffee and a little breakfast sandwich we shared with Kelsey Grammer. It was awesome. But I just went over to thank him. I was trying to leave him alone. But so when I came to America, that Jesus Revolution, that was a great movie. I don't know if you've seen it. Kelsey Grammer plays this guy. Now, again, it was I was there after this time, but basically this was on the cover of Time magazine. It was the Jesus movement in Southern California. And Chuck Smith was a pretty straight-laced, button down Methodist preacher or whatever he was, or whatever denomination he was in, I don't know. And his kid brought home a hippie one day, and then they started reaching out to the hippies, and the next thing you know, this thing kind of explodes in the early mid-70s. Well, I come along 1986, and there's this huge church. Young people are there. They're all excited about God. There's this worship music that's very vibrant, and then people are serious. And so I end up renting a room in a house that a bunch of these folks were having a Bible study in. And so then the next thing you know, I'd never really read the Bible. You know what I mean? It was in growing up in Ireland. Again, Ireland, the opening line of our Constitution is Ireland's a Catholic country, right? So like a public school is a Catholic school. And you said a prayer at the start of every class and whatever else. But the Bible in my local church was a big blue Bible. It was about this thick, and it was behind a glass case with a padlock on it, right? Because it's Ireland to be knocked off. So the closest I ever got to a Bible, it was behind a glass case with a padlock on it. You follow me?
Yes.
So all of a sudden now I'm in this Bible study and these people are reading the Bible. I'm like, what is this? I mean, I've obviously I listened to homilies and sermons, and like here's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and whatever. And so I started going to this thing every week. And then all of a sudden I was like, hey, this is fascinating. And the guy who was my roommate at the time, He said, there's a prayer, if you pray it, God will also always answer in the affirmative. Now, I don't like things like that, because like God's compelled to do anything. But he said, if you pray for a hunger for God's word, that's a prayer God always answers in the affirmative. And I couldn't really argue the theology of it. So I prayed for that for every day. And I got that. I got a great hunger for it, like an insatiable appetite. And I started studying the Bible. And then I started studying books about the Bible. And then I met a guy, actually, his name is Mike Bowman. I don't know if I've ever told anybody this at all. So you're getting a scoop here. And this will tell you about the influence of people. Ordinary, everyday people are the kingmakers, actually. So Mike Bowman was a postal worker in Tierra Santa in San Diego, California, who was a fantastic student of the Bible and had been so for most of his life. And I said to him, listen, I'd love a coach. I didn't know it was a coach at the time. I said, somebody to mentor me in this. So we met a couple of days a week for a few years. And we got both so got engaged in this, we'd go until one of us fell asleep. And I would say that period of time in my life, and it's also around the time I ended up having the motorcycle accident, where all of a sudden I was shut down. So when you have a motorcycle accident, you can't move. I had nothing else to do. I had all these books. I mean, I'm talking about word studies in the Greek and in Hebrew and things like this. Like, I went down, man, and really developed a classic understanding of the Christian faith, really understood the historical fundamental view of the church, the scriptures. And that period of time has set me up for the rest of my whole life. So whenever I teach a presentation, and again, I go to seminars, like there's people of all kinds of faiths and no faith there. And I've taken some criticism over the time, but my goal is never to proselytize a soul. However, I had a guy say to me one time, hey, you mentioned your faith a bit. Could you knock that off? And I says to him, let me ask you, do you like when I'm funny? He goes, oh, that's the best part. I said, well, me being funny is the same as me being a man of faith, is the same as me being faithful to my wife of 35 years or my 6 children. And I go, it's just who I am. Like, if you're asking me to not do a piece of me, and so, but that's been a very rare, for the 4 million people I've had in live seminars, it's a very rare complaint I get. I think people like it when you are who you are. And I will say this, without my faith, I'm not very much at all.
Yeah. And I just admire the fact that you do it. And I think more people accept it and like it than don't. And I think that makes you who you are. And I think it makes your presentations and seminars even more successful, because people like his guy's the real deal. That's what I believe.
Yeah. And again, I've taken criticism. I've had some leaders of real estate companies who go, oh no, this guy is got a secret agenda, convert people and whatever else. We don't want our people going to seminars. Okay, fine. It's just not been the deal. You've been to, how many of my seminars would you say you've been to in your career?
I was averaging 4 or 5 a year for 20 years. That's
right.
It's a lot of
So,
seminars.
Yeah. So I would just say that it's right now I'm producing carbon dioxide without trying.
There you go.
And that's what my faith is. That's what the humor is. That's what being Irish is. And so my faith is part of my whole being and who I am. And the more I'm connected to that, the better I am. And, you're talking about this chisel and the hammer. The scriptures are hard, man. Faith is hard. Like, what you're describing there is a verse that says, consider it all joy when you face trials of various kind, knowing that these trials will make you perfect, complete, and lacking in nothing. Produces perseverance. Perseverance has its work. Like, trials produce that. And I'm a guy who teaches personal growth, and there's personal growth you can do without a trial, but the deepest application of it is when you go through it. And so it ain't easy. It's not for sissies, the life of faith. But
I agree.
I'll say this: I would never understand the hammer, and I think that's why a lot of people get depressed. I think that's why a lot of people do drugs. That's why a lot of guys get addicted to pornography, or people vacate their life over to sports or gossip shows or romance shows or The Bachelorette or whatever else, because the hammer is hard and the chisel is hard. And if you don't have a place that you're able to accept that hardship, then you have to find other ways to cope with it.
Yeah, but and I see it as, he loves us so much that he wants to hit us over the head with the hammer to have the experiences we have so we can grow in faith in him.
Well, the hammer was used on his own son first.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Right.
I mean, that's Mel Gibson when he did the movie, The Passion of the Christ. I don't know if you know this, but in the film, when they had the close up of the Roman soldier's hand, that was actually Mel Gibson's hand. He didn't want anybody else to have that. Yeah, he didn't want anybody else to have that. But in the end of the hardest thing to understand in the faith journey, that was God's hands nailing his own son to the cross. So for us, it's pretty gentle compared to that. For us, we didn't have to experience the separation of God. We get to experience the love of God. So, but I just don't think without faith, I could even comprehend that or understand that. It would sound draconian, but it's definitely the essence of everything I believe and do.
Chiseled is presented by the Commodari Group of eXp Realty, led by your host, Rob Commodari. Are you planning to buy or sell? We know the process can feel stressful and frustrating. That's why Rob and his team focus on providing a personal touch and the best service and guidance during your transaction. The Commodari Group are top-tier professionals who deliver spectacular customer service. They provide expert advice on accurately pricing your home and making the entire process smooth and seamless. They simply get it done. Here's the connection to Chiseled. Many of the amazing guests you hear on this podcast are part of Rob's extended referral network. While the Commodari Group serves the Baltimore area, Rob can connect you with superb representatives across North America. Clients rely on this network because Rob actually cares about you and your family, treating your experience as if it was his own. Don't settle for less than the best. If you need a trustworthy and knowledgeable agent locally or across North America, Rob is the guy to call. Contact the Commodari Group of eXp Realty today. Call 410-817-7050 or email Rob directly, rob@talktorob.com.
So take me back, Brian, like you talked about this faith right now. So take me back, like you said, you weren't on fire yet. You said it started to happen during the accident. So you have this accident, you're laying in bed, you just come over from Ireland. And so you had that. And later on in life, you had the fire, burnt your house down. And I want you to share a little bit about the statue of Job that was left there. But what were your conversations with God through the accident and then through the fire? Did they change? Were they the same?
Oh, no, they're certainly more developed, but the tendencies are all there. At the end of the day, we all fight the works mentality. Like the better I am, the more you love me, or the better I am, the more righteous I am, which is just not the deal, But when I first got hit, do you think I didn't say to God, why me? Hey, I really had committed my life to Christ October 7th, 1986. I got in a motorcycle accident October 30th. I was like, that's not what the preacher was promising 27 days later.
That was your first challenge, right?
And it was like, hey, wouldn't it be great if I went back and I was this great soccer player and I was able to put the ball in the back of the net and say, God loves you, isn't that what a lot of guys do? I mean, that's what I want to do. Score a goal for Liverpool, turn to the camera. Jesus loves you, No, I'm like, wouldn't that have been the deal? Like, that was my bargain with God. And God had a different plan for me. By the way, I wouldn't have stayed in America. By the way, it turns out one of the Bible studies at the house I was renting was the Olympic team. And my wife comes walking in there. And
interesting.
I wouldn't have met her. And I've said this before, knowing what I know now, if I had the chance again and I was riding that motorcycle down Fay Avenue and I knew what was on the other side of it, I would gladly drive into the side of that car. And I would go through 2 years of, I would offer up the leg and I would go through 2 years of hell for what came out the other side. So, God, you say God works all things together for good, that those who love him are called according to his purpose. And so there's no doubt. Now, I would still say this. I have lingering effects of it. I have things that challenge me. I'm standing on stage for hours. I get some challenges because of that. So there's ongoing difficulties. The Apostle Paul, he had his road to Damascus experience. And then you can see in his writings, he goes, see which what large letters I write to you. I think he had an eye problem the rest of his life, you know? So you go through these challenges. It doesn't mean there's not scars with them, you know? But so the first time it happened like that, but and again, many other more difficult things. But you talk about the house fire, right? So I had the statue of Job, which is one of my favorite characters in the Bible, because Job is a guy who he has the chat with God. Like, he's the faithful guy. He's doing good. Everything in his world, all his kids die, his fortune's taken away. Everything's ransacked. He gets ill. He gets boils all over his body. His wife turns on him. Why don't you curse God? His 3 best buddies come along, giving him bad advice. You know, they're all it's because of what you did, and you're a miserable guy, right? Which people give that advice today, right? These bad things are happening to you because you did bad things, you know, and God just doesn't work like that. And then finally, Job breaks down, and out of frustration, he goes to God and go, you know, that which you always, that which I always feared has come to pass, you know. And it was like, I in his back of his mind, he always had this view of God as like the God of the baseball bat that was keeping score, you know. And I always remember, you know, we talk about contemplative prayer, you know, Father Thomas Keating, who passed here not so long ago, was a great mentor of mine. And he said, you know, he met this lady one time, and she goes, I just grew up with God was a watcher. My mother always said, God's watching you. And she goes, like, you know, if I took a cookie out of the cookie jar, my mother would say, God's watching you. And, you know, Father Keaton said to her, he goes, well, God is watching you, but what if he's saying to you, when you put your hand in the cookie jar, he's whispering to you to take 2, you know? And so, you know, again, I just think for myself, when I had this Job statue, which is when Job talks to God, and God says, God never answered his questions. He's, you know, the worst thing in the world. I mean, the most tragedy you can possibly experience as a human being, other than death, happened to the man. And God goes, were you there when I put the lumps on the alligator's back? Were you there when I built the storehouses for the snow? Were you there when I said to the oceans, this far you shall come and no further? And he gives him this lesson on creation. And so I had a statue outside my home of Job standing on this globe. It was a brilliant sculptor made it for me. And then the iron part was Job in the whirlwind with his hand over his mouth. And in Hebrew, it says around it, I'm reduced to dust and ashes. Because that's what Job said. When God revealed himself to Job, Job put his hand over his mouth and says, I'll never ask you again, because now I've seen who you are. And all my little problems and all my little peccadillos and all my little complaints and all the tragedy, by the way, serious tragedy he had, went out the window when he saw the glory of God. So he put his hand over his mouth and says, I'm reduced to dust and ashes. And you know the story. I have this beautiful Georgia plantation style home in San Diego. And in 2007, that home got engulfed by a fire. My family and I barely got 6 babies out in the middle of the night. And the fire came at 75 miles an hour and consumed our home. And it destroyed everything, took the sidewalks and took them 30 yards down. In fact, the guy from New Jersey was the insurance assessor. And he said, looks like a bomb hit your house. A bomb landed on your house. But the only thing that was still there was the statue of Job, which had been right by the back door. And it was just, so the first time I get hit by the car, I'm like, hey, why me? The second time I'm like, you know, God's here. And sure enough, you know, that period of time, and it got worse after that. We ended up having to move as a family 6 times. Extraordinary circumstances. It was right in the middle of the real estate crash. And we would pay a rental payment on a house, and the guy wouldn't make his mortgage payment and get foreclosed on. In fact, you were at a seminar I was at in Richmond right after the fire. Well, what nobody knew, the audience, was my wife called me during that seminar and said, they've just kicked us out of the house we're renting because the guy we've been paying hasn't been making his mortgage payment.
Wow, I didn't know that.
So we end up having to move 6 times in the next 18 months. So you go through these times, but I knew at that stage, it's like, again, God was chiseling away. And what happened out of that? Our family was pretty close before that. Our family is uniquely close since then. And I have 6 amazing children who've grown up in a fairly wealthy circumstance, who are not attached to the things of this world at all. And they're not materialistic people. And so they're kind of freaks of nature in that regard. So again, that was part of the chiseling they got. It's not what I wanted them to have happen. It's not the difficulty I wanted them to endure, but you know, And that's why I've moved house twice since then. The Job statue comes with me.
Does it? Okay, good.
It's
good.
always
That's
in
good
the
to know.
contract. No, the statue's not part of the deal.
But you said something, Brian. You said the first time is, why did you do this to me? And then the second time, oh, he's here. So you said that. So that to me says, okay, Brian's increased his level of awareness over time. His consciousness has improved, right? And the
faith is another word for it, yeah.
Okay. So the single one thing you taught me that's had an impact more than anything else in my life is that contemplative prayer in Ireland. You were on stage and you were talking about that. And I remember what I left Ireland. I went home. I started reading Keating, and I started getting into it. And I started talking to some priests, and everybody would say it's very hard, but it's very rewarding. And I remember doing it for 6 years, Monday through Friday. I would drop my kids off at school. I'd go to church. I'd sit by myself. I'd journal. I'd read Thomas Keating, and I'd get quiet for like a half hour. And nothing happened right away, but I just noticed things over time. That, like, you might have heard something 1,000 times in your life, and then the 1,001st time, oh, I get it. I get it. And that was the most impactful thing I learned from your peaks. I mean, the first 3 were the best for me. I'll treasure them in my heart forever. But that contemplative prayer, it means the world to me, and it is hard. And so I see 3 levels of awareness. One is after the fact, you recognize something, right? The second is you recognize it in the instant, right? And then I feel like the third one is like you, it's like an intuition, like, if you do this, this is going to happen. It's like an awareness is coming. And it's just powerful to me to know that. So if I'm going to share one story with you, I was in Grand Canyon 4 or 5 years ago with 2 of my buddies, and we're standing there, sunset, and first time ever. You've been there, right? You've been there.
Oh yeah, many times.
You can hear the silence. You can hear it, right? And I'm in awe. I'm like, this first time ever here. Got my phone out, taking pictures. And my buddy asked me to take a picture of him. So I go to take a picture of my phone. He says, no, I want you to take it with my phone. So I go to put my phone in my pocket. And Brian, I don't get it all the way in. It hits my pocket, falls 3 feet, and it breaks. Oh. And in that moment, I'm like, God, wait a minute. I'm here, get ready to take these pictures. This beautiful setting, right? This awness of God. And it hit me, Brian, hit me right away. It's like, you don't want me to see your awness with the lens of this phone. You want me to see with the lens of my eyes. Yeah. And it just changed the way I think of things. And so I thank you for that, because the contemplative prayer has been huge for me. So
here's the thing. What is contemplative prayer at its heart? It's practicing the presence of God. What happened to you in the Grand Canyon is you put down the phone gets smashed, and now you're forced to be present. And that's what it is. And the outcome is obviously A, practicing the presence of God. B, is you become unattached. And C, you're seeking this divine union with God. And so, what I will say today, because I here's the thing, like, I just set a goal on Saturday night to make sure I do my contemplative prayer every day. Okay. Because I've been inconsistent. And, I'm not right when I don't practice it. I'll tell you that. I'm more agitated and anxious, and I'm more controlling. I'm more attached, and it's helped. So I would say this: contemplative prayer helps me to get unattached to the things of this world, unattached to conversations, unattached to outcomes. And so that's a great starting point. Okay. Because you have to become unattached to the thoughts. So, and again, anybody is Invitation to Love is the book by Thomas Keating. That's where I'd start. And it's an amazing discipline. I have a little app on my phone now where I have the Contemplative Outreach has an app, and it has the little 20 minutes, and I use that whole thing. And it's like, again, so my wife just had major surgery, and we're in the room prior to surgery, and it's all chaos and noise everywhere. And both of us just did contemplative prayer together, and we were both away,
wow,
and present together. And there was chaos all around, and basically they're going to amputate my wife's knees and put them back together again. And that's where we were. And when she came out of recovery, the first thing we did together was contemplative prayer and practicing the presence of God together. And so I know this: when I'm in that discipline, I'm in the right space. When I'm not, I'm in the wrong space, because I'm trying to control everything.
Yeah.
I go from being unattached to attached. And so, here's the deal. There's no perfect in it, and but it's, when you get, even if you do 20 minutes, and I would say, as I've been practicing this for 25 years now, minimum, actually closer to 30, that it's there's moments that come along where you get that sense of divine presence. There's moments when you recognize it during the day, and that's pretty spectacular.
Oh, it is. It is. Bro, I told you I recently had a hip replacement surgery, and as much as I'd like to say I did the contemplative prayer beforehand, I did say a prayer. But bro, I go in there. I'm sure Beverly saw kind of the same thing. But they wheel me in. I'm sitting on a gurney. She's getting ready to put the anesthesia in me, right? And I said, hey, before you do that, I got to ask a question, because you're looking around, you see the box, like all these little pieces and implants, and you see tools. And she goes, what's your question? I said, am I in Home Depot or Lowe's? So that's the last thing I remember, Brian.
Give me the drugs. Give me the drugs.
So I had to say, but they were all laughing. It was great. It was great. So, hey, so
good.
you said earlier, you said, you prayed for the hunger for the word of God, right?
Yeah.
And you want to be on fire, because one of the things I'm praying for right now is God, I want to be on fire for you. And I would tell people everything I do, and they would say, Rob, you are on fire.
Uh-huh.
So how would Brian Buffini define being on fire for God?
I mean, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord. I think I'm known as a man of action, and I've got a big motor. I know that about myself. Freak of nature is something that people refer to me all the time. I believe I reflect more of the character and nature of God when I'm not being a freak of nature. When I'm waiting and being patient instead of acting and doing. So I just feel like when I'm in that counterintuitive place, like I have a big meeting that I've got to take place here on Friday. It's a huge meeting. And my prayer is to just sit and listen. And to listen and ask questions and listen and listen and listen and keep asking questions and listen. And my nature is I'm gifted at talking. So my nature is going to want to do that. But my nurture in faith is I'm going to sit and listen and ask questions. And so it's that type of dynamic. That's how I think we grow. I'm always going to be a proactive guy. I'm always going to be an on it guy. But it's when I'm in that moment of restraint, that's when I'm actually more exhibiting the growth I have in my faith than anything.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sitting here listening to you, Brian, and there's so much more I want to ask you. But you talk about like being humble, or being humble, or get humbled, right? And sometimes our ego gets in the way,
Oh, yeah.
right? So we want to be confident, and I believe there's a healthy ego and an unhealthy ego. What's that fine line?
Yeah.
What's that fine?
What Zig Ziglar used to say, the ego was edging God out.
Yeah.
Well, it's example. Like if people were sitting here listening to you and me, they go, okay, this guy became a millionaire by, sitting in his closet and praying. No, I've worked my arse off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're right. Faith without works is dead. It's just the expression of your faith, right? You got to go do. So, but I think the key is you got to be before you can do. And so, and I've made a lot of mistakes in my life doing before I was being, And so I think the Chiseled piece, and the reason I'm on this show today, is I think you're onto something. And I think you're onto something because the truth of the matter is we're made in the image of God. And the chiseling, the purpose of it is to reveal to us his own reflection and his own image. And that's what God's after. And he knows that's what's in our best interest. And when we volunteer, then to make him, okay, I'm going to make myself and my spirit and my heart available to be more of a reflection of you. You think about it. I mean, for whatever. And again, I didn't know this was going to be such a faith-based discussion today. I'm happy to have it, by the way. But whatever your position on Jesus is, what you can't argue is this is a guy who was born in a nondescript town with nondescript parents, who was at best a carpenter, which would have been, every tradesman was a carpenter then. They didn't have electricians, and, plumbers.
Yeah, right.
Everybody was a carpenter. So probably the most common profession was carpenter, more than shepherd, because there's only so many flocks, right? So, but 2,000 years ago, everybody talks about him. When a guy who doesn't says he doesn't believe in God smashes his thumb with a hammer, he says the Lord's name. When billions of people all over the world go to church on a Sunday, just talk about him. Other religions talk about him. Okay. You know, if you read any of Muhammad's writings, there's an awful lot he has to say about Jesus. So the thing is, who he was spoke louder than anything else. And who he was, people are still talking about 2,000 years ago. And everybody, you know, today, you know, people go legacy. What's your legacy? What's your legacy? And, you know, I did an interview. I want you to listen in on the It's a Good Life podcast. I did an interview. It's going out October 7th. And it's about a mutual friend of ours, John O'Leary. And he talks about Jack Buck and the influence Jack Buck had on his life. And there's a guy that, you know, that guy got the well done and good, faithful servant on the way when he walked in the door to heaven, you know, when he passed. The things he did and the people he invested in behind the scenes, where he absolutely went out of his way for people not to know what he was doing, and invested in the life and help. And, you know, took a guy like John O'Leary as a 9-year-old boy, burned over 100% of his body, 87% third-degree burns. And here's this guy coming down. He's the most famous commentator in America at the time. It was Howard Cosell and him.
Yeah.
You know, he's in 7 Hall of Fames. And this guy is going down. He left the middle of a banquet dinner to go see this kid. He had no relationship of. He just heard he was a St. Louis Cardinals fan. And he went every single night to go see the kid. And then they said, O'Leary was saying that when the St. Louis Cardinals, when he passed, they opened up the phone lines for 3 hours for people to tell their Jack Buck stories. And he said it went on for 3 days.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of man I want to be. That's the kind of man I want to be. That's it. I mean, I've been at the top. Yes. Mansions, had my own private jets for 17 years, flew around the world. I've met all kinds of famous people. And again, I if someone has ambition and wants to drive and become a millionaire and whatever, go for it, man. Great. And it was fun, and it is fun. Okay. But it ain't the thing. You know, it's the byproduct. It ain't the thing. And I think you're onto something with this chisel, because it's ultimately conforming to the image of God, and those lumps need to get knocked off. And I'll be honest with you, bro, I'm in the middle of getting some lumps knocked off me right now over the last 3 months. And it's been the heavy hammer and the heavy steel. Some people pleasing stuff gone away. Some taking your eyes off the ball has gone away. Some focusing on the wrong things has gone away. And it's been painful and beautiful.
That's beautiful. I like what you said, painful and beautiful. So that's great. You got time for 2 more questions?
Whatever you got.
Okay. So you just used the word ambition. It was a great segue to one of the questions I was going to ask you. You were definitely ambitious. You were striving. You've achieved a lot. What is there a fine line, or what's the fine line between being ambitious and content? Can you have both and, or is either or?
You said something that's not true, my friend. You said you were ambitious.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, sorry. I just want you to know I am ambitious.
Okay.
I'm more ambitious now than I've ever been. I have different things I'm ambitious about.
Okay.
You follow?
Yeah.
But it's not like you check the box. That's why everybody thinks you just arrive and then you check the box and you're done. It's just, you know, they asked Rockefeller, how much does it take for a man to be truly happy? You know the answer.
Uh-huh.
Okay? A little bit more than he has, right? So I just want to make that clear. I'm still ambitious. I think the big thing is this. Number one, and you're asking about contentment, but I think the first delineation is understand the difference between healthy ambition and a selfish ambition. A selfish ambition is mentioned in the scriptures as a sin. And a healthy ambition, as mentioned in the scriptures, is a glory to God. You know, there's a saint from France, Saint Irenaeus of Lyon. I have a tapestry in my office. You know the quote. I've quoted it many times. The glory of God is the human man fully alive, or the human person fully alive. And so that I'm ambitious for that, and I'm pursuing that, and whatever that brings. You know. The reason I'm going to go play golf with these celebrities and the billionaires, I want to learn. I want to grow. I'm hanging out with people who are further down and doing more than I'm doing. I want to talk to them. You know, I got this leadership conference coming up. I have a guy I deeply admire named Craig Groeschel. Craig Groeschel is a pastor. He has 1,000 staff. He has 95,000 people in his churches on the Sunday morning. He has the YouVersion Bible that he's released, which has gone to 1 billion downloads worldwide. He's the most in shape guy I know. He has a podcast and he does speaking and has books. And I'm like, I need to hang out with this guy because this guy's living like 3 lives. He's got a fabulous wife of 35 years and he has 6 kids. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
And he's the same age as me, and he's in the best shape I ever saw anybody my age. So, you know, I want to be around people of character. I don't want what they have. I want to be more like what they have, a more authentic version of myself, inspired by someone who's achieving at the highest level or doing at the highest level. So the next thing I would say on the contentment side is, can you be at peace with the goals you've achieved? You know, that's where the contentment comes in. Can you be at peace with the goals you've achieved? And there's only one way to get there, Rob, and that is through gratitude. And so I've told the story before where I've had people who are staff members who travel with me exclusively via jet complain about the cheese and crackers on the stopover after they had filet mignon on the first leg. And it's like, we've lost perspective. Like I'm on the plane going, I can't believe I'm on a private plane. Like, this is amazing. And I enjoyed every ounce of it. And that's why when I sold it, because I didn't need to travel anymore, it was like no big deal. There were other people that were crestfallen. I sold my plane. And it was like, you know, because they were attached to it, or they were attached to knowing the guy who owned it. So the piece to the puzzle is, can you have that peace about, you know, that contentment? I can only come from gratitude.
Okay.
And it's very easy. I'm a refiner by nature. I can talk myself out of the house I'm living in. Oh man, the handles aren't great, and the hardware. And when they built this thing, they did this, and they could in the neighborhood, and the neighbor's doing this, and you can complain your way. And I've done this, man. I talked my way out of a fabulous. I had an ocean view house on top of a mountain that I convinced myself was a piece of garbage. And it's everyone's ever seen that house. This is the greatest house I ever saw in my life. So I think the only way to have contentment is to lead with gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have gratitude, then you can keep having the ambition and keep your intake, your associations, the affirmations you say to yourself. But you got to have this gratitude piece. So you're at peace with what you have and what you've done and where you're at, so that you can live day to day in that presence.
Thank you for that answer, Brian. As much as I have 1,000 more questions, we could go on and on. I know I got to respect the time here. So here's my last question for you. I got 2 more questions. The one's an easy one, but this one here. Where else in your life going forward do you think God's going to chisel you?
It seems to be more and more in the areas he's already chiseling. You know? It's, you know, the truth is, I think there's parts of my life I've offered up. I think some of the rock has fallen away. Mm-hmm. I think you can personally grow yourself. And you know, remember the great verse, do not conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And then you'll be perfect, complete, and lacking in nothing. So perfect, complete, and nothing, lacking in nothing is that statue that we've been made to be. So you can get there a long way. Do not conform to this world. So that starts with don't do something. So don't do what everybody else is doing. Don't do what they're doing online. Don't do what they're doing in social media. And certainly don't do what they're doing in the nightly TV programs. And don't do what all your peers are doing. Do not conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. So I will say this. I feel like as a lifelong learner, I have offered myself up, and a lot of the rubble has actually fallen away. I believe the Lord keeps hammering on the areas that are stubbornly stuck, and you know, what I need to do is keep giving it up. You know, giving it up so that the rock falls away quicker and sooner, and becomes more conformed to Him with greater ease. But you know, we Irish, we like to put up a struggle. You know.
Well, Italians too, by the way.
Well, I've got the Italian and the Irish. It's like nitro and glycerin in the same body. There, right?
I got to say this before last question. So, Brian, I don't know if I ever told you this. So I just came from a Hobbs Herder convention seminar. They wanted to sell you $14,000 brochures. And I'm like, I'm a year in the business. I'm like, I want to learn how to do this business better. And I walk into my Log and Foster office and had the racks, and there's a flyer, do business by referral, Brian Buffini, right? I'm like, yes, Italian guy, Italian name. I'm going to go see this guy, right? And then I see at this Crown Plaza Hotel in Baltimore at Timonium, Maryland, for your 2-hour event. And I'm expecting this Italian guy to come out on stage, right? And you come out top of the morning to you. And I'm like, who is this Italian wannabe, right? So that drew me to you. I was sucked in there, but then at the first turning point, it was awesome. It was all she wrote. But I had to share that with you because I'm like,
I'm glad you were able to get over your cultural bias there.
Yeah, right. So before we go, Brian, I know how to get a hold of you, and I think it'd be pretty easy for others to get a hold of you and just pass your name on. But I want to refer you business, and we talk faith-based more today than anything else. But you've built a very successful business coaching company. Yeah, how can people get a hold of you? How would you acknowledge that? How would you like people to get a hold of you?
Yeah, they should go to buffinicompany.com. I mean, check out what we do. The best thing we're doing right now, which is kind of a great example of faith, is we developed this thing called a business consultation, Rob. And I said, we've tried all these different things. And I said, how about we do this? How about we do something with no expectation of receiving? We're the best coaching company in the country. We've been doing it for 30 years. How about we give somebody one of these things? And we go take 30 minutes of somebody's time. We ask them for nothing. It's not the VCR. That's not a free timeshare prezo, that kind of deal. And we just set up this thing, and it's been unbelievable. We started it in March of this year, and it's been extraordinary in two ways. One, people have just been sending me, they get 30 minutes. I get clearing your vision, what's holding you back. Here's what people in your area are doing well. And it's just boom, they put a nice bow on it and whatever. And people have, the common feedback I get is the best 30 minutes I've had in my business all year, right? And then what's happened as a result, this is a great example of teaching what we're teaching. We did this as an expression of this to build relationships with people, right? And wouldn't you know, it's been the most successful thing we've ever done to promote coaching. And I'll be candid with, that was not the architecture behind it, but it's, give and receive, and it's been beautiful. And so it's so aligned with the referral philosophy. So that's what I would have people do. Go and get yourself a 30-minute consultation and find out those 4 things about your business, and that'll be the best 30 minutes you spend in your business this year.
And I 100% agree, and I'm happy to refer them to you. Brian, look, man, I am so grateful for your time, your wisdom, sharing your faith here. And it means a lot to me, and it's going to mean a lot to other people as you impact them. So what I say to you, until next time, Mr. Brian Buffini, let's go get chiseled.
Thank you, bud. Well, this is the most unique conversation I've had in a long time, Rob, so thanks for having me.
There you go. Thank you.